Redditor 1. I'm 43 now, a teacher by trade, but there's one memory from my youth that has never let me forget. It happened back when my friend, then serving in the Army, was stationed in 3 road grade. We were both young, riding our bikes on a quiet, isolated trail behind his house, miles away from any sign of civilization. The day was clear, the sky an unblemished expanse of blue, and yet what we witnessed that afternoon defied any ordinary explanation. I remember the feel of the cool wind rushing past us as we pedaled along the narrow dirt trail, the only sound the steady rhythm of our tires against the gravel and the occasional creak of our bikes. We were both exhilarated by the freedom of being alone out in nature, our minds light and our laughter echoing softly in the open air. Then, as we rounded a bend lined with tall, swaying pines, something caught my eye, something that froze the joy of that ride into a moment of absolute terror and wonder. There, hovering silently against the backdrop of a perfectly clear sky, was a transparent golden ring. Not just any ring, but one enormous in size, suspended in midair, moving steadily from left to right. Inside that ring, nested like a secret within a secret, was another smaller golden ring. The craftsmanship of it was beyond anything I could imagine, delicate, almost ethereal, with a quality that allowed the sky to be seen through it, as if it were made of glass forged by some unknown hand. Its golden hue shimmered in the sunlight, casting reflections that danced along the trail's edge, and, for a few agonizing seconds, time itself seemed to slow down. I remember the chill that ran down my spine as I stared, unable to blink away the sight. My friend's eyes widened, and we exchanged a look that said everything without a single word. It wasn't a trick of the light. There was nothing around that could have produced such a reflection. The day was too clear, and the surrounding landscape offered no surface reflective enough to cast such a spectacle. We both knew, instinctively, that this wasn't any natural phenomenon we'd ever encountered. Instinctively, our adrenaline surged, and we pedaled as fast as our legs would carry us back toward his house. The fear was palpable, a thick tension in the air that made each second feel like an eternity. We arrived breathless and disoriented, our hearts pounding so hard we thought they might burst. In that moment, we were separated by panic and the sudden, overwhelming urge to seek safety. I remember my friend's wild eyes as he raced away on his bike, and I couldn't bring myself to utter a word as I fumbled for the door of his house. Later, when the initial shock had subsided, both our families gathered us in separate rooms. We were each asked to draw what we had seen. I still have that faded piece of paper somewhere tucked away, a crude, childlike sketch of a massive transparent ring with a smaller ring inside, perfectly capturing the eerie beauty of the object. Astonishingly, my friend's drawing was nearly identical. It was as if, in that moment of terror, our minds had merged, recording every detail with an unspoken clarity. My mother later told me that both our sets of parents had chalked it up to a mere reflection, a trick of the light, they said, something that the human eye might mistake for a bizarre optical illusion. But I remember clearly that there was nothing in the vicinity that could have caused such a reflection. There were no bodies of water, no glass surfaces, nothing but the open trail and the vast, empty sky. Years passed. We carried that secret between us, a shared memory that was as haunting as it was inexplicable. Once, during our college years, I broached the subject with my old friend, half expecting a deep discussion about what we had witnessed. Instead, he dismissed it quickly. His response was a curt reflection, and then he changed the subject as if the matter were trivial. That reaction only deepened my own internal conflict. I knew what we saw wasn't a mundane trick of nature. It was something real, something that defied the ordinary, and it haunted me long after that day on the trail. 15 years have passed since that fateful afternoon, yet the memory remains as vivid as ever. I find myself glancing at the sky on clear days, hoping, or perhaps fearing, to see that impossible golden ring once more. In quiet moments, I recall the exact movement of the ring, its smooth, almost deliberate sweep from left to right, and the way the smaller ring inside seemed to pulsate with an inner light. The experience has shaped my perception of the world, instilling in me a constant awareness that there are mysteries far beyond our understanding, lurking just beyond the veil of everyday life. In my classroom, I sometimes catch myself pausing mid-lecture, my gaze inadvertently drifting toward the window, as if expecting the sky to reveal one of its long-held secrets. I've shared my story with a few trusted colleagues, only to be met with skeptical smiles or polite nods. Most dismiss it as the fanciful recollection of a youthful imagination, or perhaps the result of an overactive mind in the presence of a clear blue sky. But for me, the memory is unassailable, a truth etched into my very being. There are nights when sleep eludes me, and I find myself lying awake in the quiet darkness of my own room, haunted by the image of that golden ring. I remember the sensation of the cool air on my skin, the rapid beating of my heart, and the overwhelming certainty that what I witnessed was no mere trick of light or figment of my imagination. It was an encounter with something otherworldly, something that even now, after all these years, defies any rational explanation. I've turned to online forums and discussions, seeking out others who might have seen similar phenomena. Occasionally, I come across posts from strangers who describe similar encounters. A flash of golden light in a clear sky, an object so perfectly formed that it seemed to defy the chaos of the natural world. These accounts lend a small measure of comfort, for in knowing that I am not alone, I can at least believe that the universe holds secrets that many have witnessed, though few dare to speak of them openly. Still, the one conversation with my friend lingers in my mind. He remembers what he saw, every detail as clearly as I do, yet he refuses to discuss it beyond a curt dismissal. It's as if the memory itself is a burden he would rather forget. I wonder if he has come to terms with it in his own way, or if the shadow of that day still looms over him as it does over me. We once shared that secret with the unspoken promise that it would remain between us, a silent pact to keep our extraordinary experience hidden from a world that might never understand. Now, as I walk through my daily life, teaching, grading papers, and engaging with the mundane routine of existence, I carry that memory with me. It's a reminder that, despite all the rational explanations we cling to, there are moments when the universe shows us a glimpse of its deeper, unfathomable truth. That day on the trail, beneath a sky so clear it seemed to stretch into infinity, I encountered something that changed the way I see the world. It shattered the illusion of normalcy and opened my eyes to the possibility that our reality is far more complex and mysterious than we dare to imagine. Even now, when I see a clear blue sky, I can't help but scan it with a sense of longing and cautious hope, wondering if the golden ring might appear once more. I remain ever vigilant, aware that sometimes in the quiet corners of our lives, the extraordinary can manifest itself in the most unexpected ways. And though my friend may never speak of that day again, and though our families continue to insist it was nothing more than a reflection, I know what I saw. I know that on that quiet afternoon, the sky revealed a secret that has haunted me for all these years. A secret that continues to whisper of a world beyond our understanding, waiting just beyond the reach of our everyday sight. Hey everyone, if you found this channel gripping and want more jaw-dropping tales, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Turn on notifications so you're always in the loop. Redditor 2. I still remember the first time I saw them. I had always been a stargazer, a quiet observer of the night's secrets, but nothing could have prepared me for what unfolded over the span of several months. It started on a cool, clear evening when I was alone on my back porch, the sky a vast canvas of deep indigo and scattered pinpricks of light. That night, however, my eyes were drawn not to the familiar constellations, but to a series of tiny, star-like objects that moved in ways that defied every law of nature I knew. At first, they appeared as mere specks, indistinguishable from the countless stars overhead. But as I watched, I noticed something peculiar. One of the lights made a sudden, sharp 90-degree turn at a speed that left me breathless. My heart pounded so hard I could almost feel it in my throat. I blinked, certain I was imagining it, but when I looked again, there it was. A bright, unyielding point of light darting across the sky, then reversing direction with an agility that no ordinary celestial body could muster. Over the next few weeks, I found myself drawn to those impossible maneuvers night after night. Sometimes the lights would hover motionless, as if contemplating their next move. Other times, they'd zip back and forth, executing rapid, unpredictable shifts in trajectory. I couldn't help but feel that I was witnessing something orchestrated, as if the objects were engaged in a deliberate dance, choreographed by an intelligence far beyond our understanding. The experience was both mesmerizing and deeply unsettling. I remember lying on a threadbare blanket in my backyard, my eyes glued to the heavens, while a shiver of both excitement and dread ran down my spine. Every twist and reversal, every sudden burst of acceleration was etched into my memory. I would stay awake long after the rest of the world had succumbed to sleep, compelled to watch these enigmatic lights perform their otherworldly routines. At times, I even felt as if they were communicating with me, though not in any language I could decipher, a silent message that pulsed with the rhythm of their movements. As the nights grew colder, my solitary observations soon turned into something more communal. A few months later, during a long-planned camping trip in the Rocky Mountains with my family, the phenomenon revealed itself in a way I could never have imagined. We had pitched our tent on a gentle slope, surrounded by towering pines and the rugged outlines of craggy peaks under a starlit sky. The mountains had a way of amplifying the mysteries of the night. The silence out there was profound, almost sacred. We had settled around a small crackling campfire, sharing stories and laughs as the evening deepened into night. The air was crisp, and the scent of pine and burning wood filled our senses. I remember sitting there with my siblings and parents, feeling an inexplicable calm despite the chill. Then, as if on cue, I noticed something that made me sit up straighter. High above the campsite, among the myriad stars, were 3 distinct little lights, just like the ones I had been watching for months. I nudged my younger brother and pointed upward. His eyes widened in disbelief, and soon enough, every family member turned their gaze to the sky. There, moving slowly and deliberately, were the 3 objects hovering over the cluster of houses in the distant valley below. Unlike conventional aircraft or the usual passing of meteors, these lights maintained a steady, unwavering glow. They made no sound, no hum, only the quiet majesty of their presence against the infinite night. For a long while we sat in stunned silence, the only sounds those of the crackling fire and our own collective breaths. Then, as if the night had one more trick to reveal, something even more bizarre happened. Off to the side of the moon, a pale, familiar disk that had always been a constant in my life. A massive, darkened shape slowly drifted across its face. It was as if the moon itself had been partially obscured by a shadow that moved with deliberate grace, changing its position with an unhurried elegance. The object was enormous compared to the little star-like lights, yet it too exhibited the same inexplicable, unnatural behavior. I remember feeling a strange mix of awe and disquiet. The sight was so surreal that for a moment I wondered if I was dreaming. But the cool night air against my skin, the scent of pine, and the murmurs of my family grounding me in reality all confirmed that what I was witnessing was as real as it was inexplicable. My parents exchanged looks that mingled skepticism with a dawning realization that perhaps we were all witnessing something that defied everyday explanation. Later that night, while we lay in our tent, I couldn't shake the images from my mind. I listened to the wind rustling through the trees and recalled the rapid 90-degree turns and the back-and-forth dance of those elusive lights. I recalled the silent, creeping shadow that had crossed the face of the moon. I found myself revisiting the countless nights spent watching the sky alone, questioning whether those solitary experiences had been isolated incidents or if they were part of a grander, hidden tapestry that I was only beginning to glimpse. In the days that followed our camping trip, I brought up the sightings on various online forums, including Reddit, where I was met with mixed reactions. Some dismissed my account as overactive imagination or a misinterpretation of natural phenomena. Others, intriguingly, shared similar stories. People from different corners of the world recounted encounters with star-like objects performing impossible maneuvers, as if the cosmos itself were playing tricks on our collective perceptions. These accounts, coming from complete strangers, lent a strange comfort to the unsettling nature of my experiences. I wasn't alone in seeing these things. The consistency in the descriptions, the sharp turns, the sudden reversals, the way they would linger in the sky as if defying gravity, was too compelling to ignore. Yet, even as I read these posts and compared notes, the question that gnawed at me remained unanswered. What were these lights? Were they some form of advanced technology, perhaps experimental drones or secret satellites? Or were they something else entirely, manifestations of a reality that lay just beyond the veil of our understanding? I often found myself lying awake at night, my mind racing with possibilities. In the quiet hours before dawn, I would replay the images in my head, the precise geometry of the light's movements, the way they halted mid-air as if frozen in time, and the surreal spectacle of a shadow passing over the moon. There were moments when I tried to rationalize the experiences, convincing myself that they were nothing more than optical illusions or the byproducts of a mind attuned too closely to the stars. But deep down, the memory of those impossible maneuvers, the cold certainty in the way they defied physics, was indelible. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, the raw, unfiltered fear that came from witnessing something so utterly alien, so profoundly out of place in our familiar universe. Now, whenever I find myself outside on a clear night, whether alone in my backyard or gathered around a campfire with friends and family, I can't help but cast my eyes upward. There is always a part of me that hopes to see that impossible dance of lights again, that fleeting moment when the cosmos reveals its hidden wonders. I know that many will continue to dismiss these experiences as mere flights of fancy or misinterpretations of natural phenomena, but I carry the truth of those nights with me like a secret, a quiet testament to the mystery that lies just beyond the reach of our understanding. I still wonder what message, if any, those lights were trying to convey. Perhaps they were a silent reminder that our universe is far more vast and mysterious than the confines of our everyday lives. Or maybe, in their cryptic maneuvers and inexplicable paths, they were teasing us with a glimpse of something greater, a reality that exists in parallel with our own, hidden just beneath the surface of what we consider normal. In the end, I have come to accept that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. The little star-like objects in the sky, with their impossible turns and relentless, almost mocking persistence, have left an indelible mark on my soul. They serve as a constant reminder that no matter how much we think we know about the world, there will always be phenomena that challenge our perceptions and invite us to look beyond the familiar. And so, with a mix of wonder and trepidation, I continue to gaze upward, forever open to the possibility that the night sky might once again reveal its hidden secrets. Redditor 3. I never believed that the sky could hide secrets until that unforgettable evening. I was sitting in the backyard of my family home, a modest structure nestled among familiar neighborhoods, when I first saw the lights. It was one of those calm, cool nights when the mundane world seems to pause, and for a brief moment, reality feels suspended in time. My friends and I had gathered on the worn wooden steps, our chatter fading into the background as we lost ourselves in the subtle beauty of the dusk. Then, almost without warning, I noticed 3 lights hovering silently over the houses across the street. They weren't moving like any radio tower beacon or the erratic sweep of a helicopter's searchlight, nor did they trail like the slow-burning arc of a shooting star. Instead, these lights glowed steadily in a precise formation, drifting in unison as if held by an unseen hand. The colors were unlike anything one might expect. Soft and unyielding against the darkening sky, each light perfectly round and radiant. I felt my pulse quicken as I stared upward, transfixed by their silent ballet. Jordan and Mia, the 2 friends with me, were equally captivated. Their eyes widened in a shared moment of astonishment, a silent acknowledgement that what we were witnessing defied the laws of ordinary explanation. The stillness of the scene made every sound seem amplified, the rustling of leaves, the distant hum of nighttime traffic, even the soft murmur of our collective breathing. In that rare moment, time seemed to slow, each second stretching into an eternity. The 3 lights moved with deliberate grace, as if following an invisible choreography that we as mere mortals were not meant to understand. I couldn't help but wonder, were they part of some covert experiment, a malfunctioning drone, or something else entirely? None of the possibilities felt right. They simply were not like any conventional aircraft or technological device I had ever seen. As the minutes passed, the spectacle evolved. Just when I thought the night could not offer more surprises, my gaze shifted upward toward the moon. The orb of our familiar satellite shone bright and full against the velvet sky. But then something strange began to happen. A vast, darkened object slid slowly across the face of the moon. At first, it seemed as though a shadow had been cast, a subtle darkening that moved across the lunar surface like an intrusion. The object wasn't a cloud or a mere eclipse. It was a distinct, almost tangible presence that obscured part of the moon, making it look as if it were entering an entirely different phase. I remember feeling a profound sense of disquiet as I watched it drift across the lunar face. The object moved slowly, deliberately, almost as if it were surveying the Earth below. Its motion was gentle yet unmistakably purposeful, and as it reached the opposite edge of the moon, it began to fade away. It wasn't a violent disappearance. Rather, it seemed to withdraw into the depths of the night, leaving the moon to reclaim its usual brilliance, as if nothing had happened. I turned to my friends, voice trembling as I whispered, "Did you see that?" Both Jordan and Mia nodded silently, their expressions mirroring the mixture of wonder and unease that had overtaken me. It wasn't just me. Everyone present had witnessed both the three hovering lights and the enormous, darkened shape that had crossed the moon. And yet, I knew that if I were to recount the night's events to anyone outside our little circle, they would dismiss it as a trick of the light or a figment of an overactive imagination. In the days that followed, I found myself haunted by the memory of that evening. I scoured online forums and local news archives, searching for any similar accounts, and found that my experience was not entirely isolated. Others had spoken of lights drifting silently above suburban roofs and mysterious shapes crossing the moon. But the more I read, the more the accounts both fascinated and troubled me. There was an eerie consistency in these reports, a collective whisper of an otherworldly presence that defied logical explanation. Night after night, I would catch myself glancing upward whenever the sky cleared, hoping to catch a glimpse of those enigmatic lights or the darkened form that had altered the face of the moon. I began to keep a small journal, jotting down every detail I could remember, the precise positions of the lights, the exact moment when the shadow moved across the moon, even the chill that ran down my spine as the phenomena unfolded. It became a silent ritual, a way to anchor an experience that seemed almost too extraordinary to be real. As time went on, the initial shock gave way to a deeper, more contemplative state. I started wondering about the nature of reality itself. What if our understanding of the universe was so limited that such events were simply a glimpse into a realm far beyond our comprehension? What if those lights and that dark, massive object were not anomalies, but rather messages or signs from a part of existence that we are only beginning to understand? The thought both terrified and intrigued me, planting seeds of curiosity that would sprout into late-night discussions with like-minded friends and even skeptical acquaintances who were, against their better judgment, willing to entertain the possibility that the universe held secrets far more profound than we dare to imagine. I began to question everything I thought I knew. The predictable patterns of daily life, the routine rhythms of work, the steady progression of time, suddenly seemed inadequate in the face of such inexplicable beauty and terror. The night had opened a door to a reality where the extraordinary could surface in the most mundane of settings: a quiet neighborhood, a familiar street, the unassuming face of the moon. Every time I saw a glimpse of a light or a shadow that moved in ways that defied conventional logic, I felt the lingering echo of that unforgettable night. Some nights, when the sky is clear and the air carries a hint of mystery, I return to that same spot on my back porch. I sit in silence, wrapped in a blanket of memories and wonder, scanning the heavens with an ever-watchful eye. The experience taught me to be receptive to the unknown, to accept that the universe is vast and filled with phenomena that may never fit neatly into the boxes of science or reason. It was a lesson in humility, the acknowledgement that despite all our advancements and our ceaseless quest for knowledge, there remains an infinite expanse of mystery that defies our understanding. Even now, I sometimes catch myself lost in thought, recalling the 3 luminous orbs hovering above our houses and the massive dark form that had momentarily transformed the face of the moon. Those images, etched into my mind with a clarity that belies the passage of time, serve as a constant reminder that there is so much more to this world than what our eyes can see and our minds can fathom. The universe, in its infinite majesty, continues to reveal itself in fleeting, inexplicable moments that challenge the very foundations of our understanding. I share my story not in the hope of convincing others of its truth, for I know that skepticism is as natural as wonder, but to keep alive the memory of that night. A night when the ordinary transformed into the extraordinary, when the sky revealed secrets that most would never believe. And though many may dismiss my account as fanciful or exaggerated, I hold on to the undeniable truth that on that quiet evening, the cosmos reached down and brushed the edge of our little world with its infinite mystery. Every time I look up at the heavens, I remember the 3 hovering lights and the silent, dark traveler across the moon, and I am filled with both awe and a lingering, inexplicable fear. For in that moment, I glimpsed the vast, unfathomable tapestry of the universe, a tapestry woven with threads of wonder, terror, and the promise that we have only just begun to understand the cosmic secrets that lie beyond. Redditor 4. I remember that night like it was etched into my very soul. It was late, around 11 or 12, and the urgency of the situation made every second stretch on painfully. My mom was unwell, and with no proper medical center in our small town of barely 300 people, we had no choice but to make the long drive into the city. The van's headlights cut through the dark, rural road as I navigated a familiar overpass, a route we'd taken countless times before. Yet nothing in that routine journey could have prepared me for what happened next. We were barreling along the road in tense silence, my mind consumed by worry for my mom and the relentless hum of the engine. The radio played softly in the background, its melody nearly drowned out by the rapid beating of my heart. The countryside around me was quiet, the only sounds being the steady thrum of tires on asphalt and the occasional gust of wind rattling the van's old frame. I was hyper-aware of every movement, every shadow flitting at the edge of my vision, because in that moment, survival felt like a fragile promise. Then, as we were approaching the overpass, something caught my eye. A flash of movement so sudden and so out of place that time itself seemed to hesitate. I glanced quickly to the right, and there it was, a triangle-shaped object, hovering impossibly close to my van. I swear to this day it was only about 2 feet from the side of the vehicle. At first I thought my eyes were deceiving me. Perhaps it was a trick of the light, a reflection of some roadside sign or the glint of an errant piece of metal. But as I stared, the truth became undeniable. The object was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was a ship, a UFO in every sense of the word. Its form was triangular, with smooth angular edges that glinted with a strange, otherworldly luster. Oddly enough, while it spanned a width and length that made it seem enormous, its vertical dimension appeared to be no more than 2 inches. It was as if someone had taken a massive, intricate machine and flattened it into a thin, golden disc. An impossibility that defied all common sense. The craft shimmered with a transparent golden quality that allowed the faintest hints of the world behind it to show through, lending it an almost ethereal presence. For about 3 seconds, 3 agonizing seconds that felt like an eternity, I was paralyzed. I blinked, and in that momentary lapse of vision, the object vanished. I could scarcely believe my own eyes. Had it really been there, so close and so real? I could still feel the echo of that moment, the silent shock that had frozen me in my seat. My mind raced with questions. What was it? How could a spaceship appear out of nowhere right in front of my van and then disappear just as quickly? I kept driving, my hands trembling on the steering wheel as I processed what I had seen. The road ahead seemed suddenly foreign, the familiar overpass now haunted by the memory of that impossible encounter. I couldn't shake the image of that triangular ship, the way its golden surface had caught the faint light of the approaching city, its presence both fragile and imposing at the same time. Every instinct in me screamed that I had witnessed something extraordinary, something that shattered every expectation of how our world was supposed to work. Later, when we finally reached the city and my mom was taken to the hospital, I tried desperately to recount what I had seen. I told anyone who would listen about the UFO that had materialized so close to our van, about the way it hovered for those brief seconds, then vanished as if swallowed by the night. But my story was met with raised eyebrows and skeptical laughter. Friends, family, even strangers. No one believed me. They said, "A ship just appears in front of you? Sure, right." as if the very idea were too absurd to be real. I wasn't naive enough to let their disbelief silence the memory. Over the years, I've seen plenty of strange lights and unexplained phenomena, and while I know that sometimes our eyes can play tricks on us, this incident was different. There was no haze of alcohol or the clouded judgment of intoxication that might explain such a vivid hallucination. I was fully awake, fully aware, and fully present in that van as we raced through the dark, lonely road. The clarity of the moment, the undeniable presence of that golden, triangular craft, continues to haunt me. Sometimes, late at night when I'm alone with my thoughts and the quiet hum of modern life has settled into a deep, uneasy silence, I close my eyes and see that ship again. I recall the way its surface gleamed, a delicate interplay of light and shadow that defied explanation, and I wonder if, somewhere in the vast tapestry of the cosmos, there are others who have experienced something similar. I know there are those who've shared their own stories, whispered confessions of close encounters and inexplicable apparitions, yet the world at large remains stubbornly indifferent to such mysteries. I've tried to rationalize it in countless ways. Perhaps it was a reflection off a strangely angled piece of metal, or a misinterpreted flare from an airplane's landing gear, but nothing in the environment could account for its form, its proximity, or the sheer impossibility of its existence. The clear sky of that night left no room for hidden mirrors or deceptive surfaces. In that moment, it was as if the boundaries of our known reality had been momentarily breached, allowing a glimpse of something far beyond the mundane, a secret that the universe was unwilling to share openly. In the days and years that followed, I searched for answers. I scoured online forums and exchanged messages with fellow witnesses, only to be met with a mix of confirmation and ridicule. Many insisted that what they had seen were just tricks of the light, or the product of overactive imaginations, while others recounted eerily similar experiences. Despite the constant barrage of skepticism, I hold tightly to the certainty of that night. I know what I saw, and the memory of that brief, electrifying encounter is as real to me as the steady pulse of my own heartbeat. There are nights when driving down a quiet stretch of road, I find myself glancing nervously at the side of my van, half expecting that golden triangle to reappear. The thought sends a shiver down my spine, a reminder that our reality is never as complete or as predictable as we would like to believe. In those moments, the world seems to teeter on the edge of the extraordinary, and I am left to wonder what other secrets might be lurking in the shadows, waiting to reveal themselves in the blink of an eye. I share this story not to convince anyone that I'm an inveterate dreamer or a chronic liar, but simply to preserve the memory of that inexplicable moment. I know that many dismiss such accounts as the stuff of tall tales, but for me, that night remains a testament to the enduring mystery of the universe. A spaceship, a golden triangle, materialized right before my eyes, a fleeting encounter that continues to challenge everything I once believed about the natural world. Even now, years later, the memory is vivid and unyielding. It reminds me that no matter how much we think we understand, there are forces and phenomena in our universe that defy logic, that exist just beyond the grasp of our ordinary senses. And in those rare silent moments on a lonely road under the cover of night, I still feel that ancient, inexplicable wonder. A hope that maybe, just maybe, the cosmos will reveal its secrets to those who dare to look up. Redditor 5. I remember that night like it was carved into my memory in vivid, inescapable detail. It was sometime around 2010, a few years back, when life still seemed full of endless possibilities and the weight of the world hadn't yet settled in. My buddies and I had been hanging out at our friend's house, laughing and joking around, our minds light from the haze of a good high. The house was filled with the low hum of music and the easy banter of friends enjoying the fleeting freedom of youth. After a couple of hours, when most of the group decided to head inside, only Jacob and I remained outside. We lingered on the back porch, the cool night air wrapping around us as we continued to joke and mess around, unaware that the sky above was about to reveal something no one could ever explain. The night was deep and dark, the kind of evening when the world feels both infinite and intimate at the same time. There wasn't a cloud in the sky, and the stars, though faint, punctuated the darkness with their distant glow. We were sitting there, half in conversation and half lost in our own thoughts, when suddenly, Without any warning, the sky exploded with a brilliant, bright orange light. It was as if someone had flipped a cosmic switch, and in a matter of seconds, the dark heavens were transformed into a radiant, almost blinding display of color. The brightness was overwhelming, a searing flash that lit up the entire expanse above us, making it nearly as if it were daytime for a fleeting moment. I remember the shock that seized me in that instant. My heart pounded wildly in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears as the light washed over everything. The transformation was so sudden that it felt like time itself had slowed down. Each second stretched out, laden with the weight of something extraordinary unfolding overhead, and then, just as quickly as the orange light had appeared, it began to shift, cycling through a mesmerizing array of colors. First, the sky deepened into a rich red, as if it were bleeding passion and danger all at once. Then came a vibrant green, pulsating with an almost hypnotic intensity, followed by a striking yellow that seemed to vibrate with energy, and finally, a mysterious purple that cloaked the heavens in a surreal, otherworldly glow. The entire sequence lasted only a matter of seconds, but those seconds felt like an eternity. I could see every color in crisp detail, each hue blending seamlessly into the next in a symphony of light that defied any natural order. Jacob and I sat in stunned silence, our eyes locked on the celestial performance above us. There was no sound accompanying the light, no hum, no rumble, just an overwhelming visual intensity that rendered us utterly speechless. In that moment, the sky became a living canvas, painted in colors so vivid and impossible that it seemed to challenge every notion of reality we held. For a long moment after the dazzling display faded, the night returned to its familiar darkness as if nothing had ever happened. The stars reappeared, timidly reclaiming the vast black expanse, and the world around us settled back into its quiet routine. But something in that moment had irrevocably changed the way I saw the night. I could still feel the echo of those shifting colors, a lingering residue of wonder and terror that clung to my mind long after the spectacle had ended. Jacob and I exchanged glances, both of us struggling to process what we had just witnessed. There was an unspoken understanding between us, a silent acknowledgement that what we had seen was no mere trick of the light, no hallucination born from our altered state. It was something real, something that defied all logical explanation. Over the following days, the memory of that night hovered over me like a persistent shadow. I found myself glancing up at the sky whenever I could, half expecting it to burst into that kaleidoscope of colors again. I tried to talk about it with others, but every time I mentioned it, I was met with incredulous looks and dismissive comments. It was probably just a trick of the light, they'd say, or you were too high to see things clearly. But I knew what I had seen, and deep down, I understood that the universe had just offered me a glimpse into something far beyond the ordinary. In the weeks that followed, Jacob and I rarely spoke of that night. The memory was too potent, too loaded with questions and unspoken fears to be revisited casually. Whenever the topic arose, there was a heavy silence, a mutual understanding that some experiences were better left unexamined. I couldn't help but wonder if that brilliant display was a message, a brief, tantalizing hint that the world was much larger, much more mysterious than we ever dared to imagine. Was it a natural phenomenon we had never been taught about, or was it something else entirely? A cosmic signal, perhaps, from realms beyond our understanding. Even now, years later, the memory of that night remains with me, an indelible mark on my consciousness. There are moments when I catch myself staring into the dark expanse of the sky, a quiet hope stirring within me that one day the colors might return. I often lie awake at night, the image of that shifting, pulsating sky replaying in my mind with an intensity that both fascinates and terrifies me. It is a reminder that beneath the veneer of normalcy, our universe is a vast, ever-changing tapestry of wonder and mystery, a place where the rules of time and space can be momentarily rewritten in a burst of incandescent light. I've shared the story on forums and with a few close friends, and while a handful have claimed to witness something similar, most dismiss it as the ramblings of an overactive imagination or the side effects of a night spent too deep in a haze. But I know what I saw. I remember every detail. The sudden explosion of orange light, the rapid and unexplainable transition through red, green, yellow, and purple, and the return to a quiet, unassuming darkness. It was a moment that shattered the boundaries of my everyday reality and opened my eyes to the possibility that the cosmos still holds secrets far beyond our comprehension. Sometimes, when I'm alone and the night is especially clear, I can almost feel that extraordinary energy in the air. The memory of that kaleidoscopic sky lingers like a quiet promise, a reminder that the world is filled with mysteries waiting to be uncovered, if only we dare to look up. And though Jacob and I have rarely spoken of that night since, its impact is something we carry silently with us, an eternal echo of a time when the heavens themselves revealed a glimpse of the unfathomable, leaving us forever changed. Redditor 6. I was driving towards I-5 from Corvallis on a cool, overcast afternoon when everything shifted from ordinary to utterly inexplicable. My buddy, Derek, and I had spent the morning running errands and grabbing coffee, our conversation light and easy as we cruised along the winding roads that cut through the heart of Oregon's ever-changing landscape. The radio played a familiar tune, barely audible above the steady hum of the engine and the whisper of the tires on the pavement. I had always found solace in these quiet drives, a moment of isolation on the open road where my thoughts could wander freely. But that day, the sky had something else planned. As we approached the outskirts of Corvallis, the sky seemed to darken in a way that defied the weather forecast. It wasn't a coming storm or the typical early dusk of autumn. It was something more deliberate, almost as if the heavens had been rearranged overnight. I glanced over at Derek, who was focused on his steering, his eyes reflecting a mix of curiosity and subtle apprehension. Then I saw it, a formation that made my heart begin to pound in my chest. Floating over the town, suspended in the vast roiling sky, were 5 distinct lights arranged in the shape of a pyramid. They shimmered with an intensity that was impossible to ignore, each point of light perfectly aligned as if placed by a meticulous hand. At first, I thought it might be some sort of elaborate drone display, or perhaps even a formation of aircraft. But the more I stared, the more I realized that nothing about them conformed to any technology I had ever seen. The lights were not pulsing or blinking in the erratic way of searchlights. They held a steady, otherworldly glow that lent them an eerie permanence. They seemed to defy gravity, floating effortlessly against the brooding backdrop of the sky. My brain raced as I tried to piece together what I was witnessing, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. If that pyramid of lights was indeed one single object, the sheer scale of it, its width stretching over the skyline, was almost unimaginable. The thought alone sent a wave of primal fear through me. "Derek, do you see that?" I managed to say in a strained whisper, though I knew he'd seen it too. His eyes met mine through the windshield, wide with disbelief. We slowed our van to a crawl, both of us transfixed by the sight. For a few heart-stopping moments, time seemed to pause. The ordinary world, the passing trees, the distant hum of another vehicle, melted away, leaving only that floating pyramid and the dread that it was something not meant for our eyes. In that moment, my mind couldn't help but race back to other inexplicable experiences. I remembered, almost as if it were a bad dream, the time we had literally driven through a rainbow. It had been a day like any other, a casual drive along a sunlit highway, when suddenly, as if the sky had cracked open, a brilliant spectrum of colors arced overhead. The vibrant hues had splashed across the sky and enveloped our van in a surreal, otherworldly glow. That experience had felt like a premonition, a fleeting glimpse into a hidden world behind the veil of our own. And now here was this pyramid of lights, a sight so similar in its impossible beauty that it brought back that same mix of wonder and terror. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as we continued to inch forward, reluctant to break the spell. The formation maintained its steady pace, drifting slowly across the horizon. I tried to calculate its distance, its size relative to the distant city lights of Corvallis below, but my mind refused to work normally under the weight of such an anomaly. It was as if the object existed in a dimension where common measurements held no meaning. Derek finally broke the silence. "This isn't some kind of formation we're used to seeing," he said, his voice barely audible over the drone of the engine. It looks like it's right out of a movie." I nodded silently, unable to tear my eyes away from the display above. It was a scene that felt both surreal and hyper-real. a moment of undeniable clarity that clashed with the banality of our everyday drive. As we continued, the lights began to shift imperceptibly, drifting slowly as though they were surveying the land below. Their movement was not erratic, but measured, almost as if they were following a predetermined path. I felt a growing sense of isolation, a terrifying recognition that out here on this lonely stretch of road, we were utterly insignificant in the face of something far greater. The normal sounds of the highway faded into a hushed backdrop, replaced by the steady rhythm of my own breathing and the persistent thump of my heart. For what felt like an eternity, we watched as the pyramid glided across the sky, casting a faint luminescent glow on the rolling fields below. I couldn't help but wonder what kind of intelligence or purpose lay behind such a formation. Was it a vessel, a messenger, or something else entirely? A harbinger of mysteries that we were never meant to understand? The questions swirled in my mind, mixing with the fear that paralyzed me. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the pyramid began to fade from view. It drifted away, its lights dissolving into the gathering dusk until, with a final, almost imperceptible shimmer, it was gone. The sky slowly returned to its normal if overcast state, and the oppressive weight that had filled the van lifted slightly, replaced by a heavy silence of disbelief. Derek and I sat in the driver's seat, our hands frozen on the wheel, reluctant to break the spell with idle chatter. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. We simply let the memory of that fleeting encounter sink into our bones. I glanced over at Derek, whose face was illuminated only by the dim glow of the dashboard. "You know," he murmured after a long pause, "I've seen weird stuff before, but nothing like that, not even the Rainbow Drive." I nodded in agreement, recalling that surreal moment when the sky had burst into a riot of colors, a phenomenon so beautiful it had left me both uplifted and unnerved. It was as if the universe had a secret language, one that manifested in sudden bursts of wonder and horror, and on that day, it had spoken to us in a language we could barely comprehend. As we merged onto I-5 and left the strange perimeter of Corvallis behind, the image of that pyramid lingered in my mind like a stubborn phantom. Every time I glanced at the sky over subsequent days, I half expected to see those 5 lights reassembling into that impossible formation. I wondered if anyone else had witnessed it, if perhaps the formation was a fleeting phenomenon shared by others who, like us, had driven under its watchful gaze. I later learned that others in the area had similar stories, unexplained encounters with lights and colors that defied conventional explanations. And though we exchanged furtive nods and knowing glances, no one ever spoke about it openly. It was as if we were all in on a secret too vast and unsettling to articulate. I often find myself thinking back to that drive, to the moment when the ordinary gave way to the extraordinary. That day, as I navigated the highways of Oregon with my friend by my side, I was reminded that our world is layered with mysteries that lie just beneath the surface of everyday life. For a brief, terrifying moment, I saw something that challenged every assumption I had about reality. The Pyramid of Lights was not a trick of the eye or an elaborate illusion. It was a message, a silent testament to the vast, uncharted territories of the unknown. Even now, years later, the memory remains as vivid as the day it happened. I still drive those roads, and sometimes, when the sky is just right, I catch a glimpse of a stray beam of light or a flash of color that sends my heart racing, and every time I remember that day near Corvallis, when the sky itself seemed to rearrange its order, and for a moment, I was given a glimpse into a realm where the rules of nature no longer applied. I don't know if I'll ever learn what those lights truly were or what they meant, but the experience has changed me. It has taught me that there is beauty and terror in the unknown, and that sometimes the universe chooses to reveal its secrets in ways that defy all expectation. As I continue on my journey through life, I carry that memory with me, a reminder that even in the most mundane moments, there can be an encounter with the extraordinary, a fleeting moment when the cosmos reveals a hidden truth that leaves an indelible mark on your soul. Redditor 7. I still remember that backpacking trip across Ireland with a mix of wonder and lingering unease. My friend and I had been traveling light, our backpacks filled with nothing more than the essentials and our hearts open to the unknown. Ireland, with its bustling towns and vast stretches of empty countryside, always had a way of making you feel both alive and incredibly small. We'd spent days riding trains through lively streets and then driving along winding rural roads where nothing stirred for miles. It was in one of those quiet, lonely pockets that our most unforgettable experience occurred. One crisp afternoon, we set off on a hike through a long, hilly field. The path wound upward slowly, and as we climbed, the landscape unfurled below us like a living map. Far off in the distance, I could just make out the shimmering outline of a massive lake nestled within a national park, a body of water so vast it seemed to merge with the horizon. The field was nearly empty, with only wild grasses bending in the soft breeze and the occasional lone shrub dotting the land. It felt as if we were the only souls in a vast, silent expanse. After almost an hour of trekking, we found a secluded spot near a shallow ditch bordered by a scraggly bush. There was a natural privacy here, a kind of rugged shelter, away from the prying eyes of the few passing travelers. We decided to set up camp there, laying out our sleeping mats and building a small fire. As the sun began its slow descent, its fading light bathed the field and lake in a warm, golden glow. We sat close by the fire, sharing food and laughter, letting the gentle sounds of the countryside lull us into a comfortable stillness. That first night, as dusk deepened into twilight, we sat on the edge of our makeshift camp and watched the sky. The clouds above the distant mountain began to shimmer with intermittent flashes of light, brief, erratic bursts that seemed almost too sudden for the gradual dying of the day. At first, we dismissed them as natural phenomena, perhaps the result of sunlight catching on a high cloud bank, or a peculiar play of atmospheric electricity. There was nothing there, no movement that hinted at any presence, just quick, isolated flickers that disappeared as abruptly as they had come. The next day, we spent the morning wandering the field, enjoying the openness and the gentle hum of the Irish countryside. We returned to our camp in the afternoon, tired yet content, and prepared to settle in for another quiet night. That evening, the atmosphere had changed. The air was cooler and the sky, now heavily overcast, held a mysterious, deep gray cast. We returned to the same spot on the hilltop where we had once basked in the soft glow of the sunset, but tonight, darkness was fast approaching, and the silence of the field felt heavier somehow. As we sat eating a simple meal by the dwindling light of our fire, I suddenly became aware of a presence that didn't belong. Out in the distance, framed against the cloudy sky, stood 3 tall figures. They were dot-like at first, a mere suggestion of form against the vast expanse. But as my eyes adjusted, I could see them clearly. They stood at various points around the field, positioned almost as if they had been planted there by some unseen hand. Their silhouettes were elongated, and although the light was dim, I could make out the unmistakable outline of human-like shapes. Yet there was something eerie in their posture, as if they were completely still and intent solely on watching. I nudged my friend, and we both leaned forward, our eyes fixed on the strange visitors. In a mixture of hesitation and curiosity, we stood and walked toward them, keeping our voices low. "Hello?" I called out softly, though the words seemed swallowed by the vast, oppressive quiet. We waved, our gestures tentative and unsure, hoping for some sign of acknowledgement. But the figures simply stood there, unmoving. Their faces were obscured by the dim light, and even the outline of their bodies exuded an unnerving stillness. They did not move closer or retreat. They were simply there, as if waiting. Minutes passed in this surreal tableau. I remember feeling a chill that wasn't solely from the dropping temperature, a cold dread that seeped into my bones. I couldn't help but wonder if these were locals, perhaps just as startled by our presence as we were by theirs. But there was no familiarity in their stance, no warmth or human hesitation. They were silent, detached observers of our small camp. I kept glancing over at my friend, whose eyes were wide with a mix of fear and wonder, and I realized that we were both grasping for explanations that wouldn't come. As darkness finally claimed the field, we retreated to our tent. The 3 figures remained visible for a short while longer, standing like statues against the restless sky. Once we were inside, we took turns keeping lookout, our nerves frayed and our minds racing. Every rustle of the wind, every snap of a twig outside the tent, sent our hearts into sudden leaps. I sat there awake for what felt like hours, the image of those silent, watchful forms burning into my mind. The sense of being observed never fully lifted, even as I tried to convince myself that there must be a rational explanation. A prank, a trick of the shadows, or maybe just an overactive imagination fueled by the isolation of the field. In the morning, the landscape seemed to resume its ordinary character. The figures were gone, no trace of their presence remained except for the unsettling memory etched in our minds. We packed up our camp in silence, the weight of the previous night heavy in our steps. Without a word, my friend and I decided to leave that place behind. We set off on foot, hitchhiking to the next town, our conversation reduced to murmurs and the sound of our footsteps crunching on the gravelly path. Even now, years later, I recall that night with an ache that is both nostalgic and unnerving. I've tried to find logical explanations for what we experienced, the interplay of light and shadow, a trick of the clouds, or even a hallucination born of exhaustion. But none of these theories can quite capture the surreal reality of those three silent figures standing against the dark Irish sky. Some say it was an elaborate prank, others insist it was a natural optical illusion, yet deep down, I know what I saw was real. There was an intelligence to their stillness, a deliberate presence that defied casual explanation. I often wonder if they were human, drawn by the isolation of the countryside and the curiosity of strangers, or if they were something else entirely, alien visitors, spirits of the land, or perhaps guardians of that ancient field, watching over the barren expanse as they had for countless generations. The countryside of Ireland holds many secrets, and that field, with its endless horizon and silent lake in the distance, seemed to be one of them. It was a place where the boundary between the ordinary and the extraordinary blurred, where the cosmos revealed a fleeting glimpse of its deeper hidden truths. I've mentioned that night on online forums and to a few skeptical friends, but most dismiss it as the product of an overactive mind in an unfamiliar land. Yet whenever I find myself under a cloudy Irish sky, I remember those three tall figures standing quietly as if they were guardians or watchers, and I feel that same inexplicable chill. I know that there must be a simple explanation, something that science and common sense can account for, but the memory persists, stubborn and unyielding. It reminds me that sometimes the universe doesn't need to announce its secrets with a roar. Sometimes it whispers them in the stillness of a lonely field, leaving you forever changed. Redditor 88A. I was working the night shift at the grocery store, a job I'd done for years without ever expecting to witness something that would haunt me for the rest of my life. It was a warm August night in 2007, and the clock had just edged past 10 p.m. The full moon hung low in the sky, its silvery glow lighting up the world outside with an almost eerie clarity. I remember how the moonlight transformed the clouds into glowing, shifting shapes, and how the whole night felt suspended in a strange, otherworldly calm. That night, like many others, I had been keeping an eye on the parking lot from the security booth. The store was mostly quiet, with only a few late-night customers milling about. I'd grown accustomed to the occasional whispers and murmurs from people stepping out for a breath of cool night air. But this time, something was different. As I glanced out the window, I noticed a small crowd of customers gathered near the store's entrance, their faces illuminated by the moon's bright light. Their expressions were a mix of astonishment and disbelief, and I could hear snippets of their conversation as I leaned forward. Curiosity got the better of me. I stepped out into the warm night air, leaving the comforting hum of the security monitors behind. My sneakers crunched softly on the pavement as I walked toward the group, my heart beginning to pound in anticipation and a twinge of apprehension. As I drew nearer, I saw what had captured everyone's attention, a dark, triangular object slowly gliding through the sky above us. At first, I assumed it was some sort of low-flying plane. After all, on a warm August night, with the moon casting long shadows, the sight of an aircraft wasn't entirely out of the ordinary. But as the object approached, my eyes widened in disbelief. It wasn't behaving like any plane I had ever seen. The object was a black triangle, its edges sharp and defined against the luminous backdrop of the moonlit clouds. 3 bright yellow lights adorned its sides, glowing steadily without any flicker or pulse. They weren't like the blinking navigation lights of an airplane. They shone with an intensity that was both mesmerizing and unsettling. The shape itself was odd. While its overall form was triangular, It wasn't a flat disc like one might imagine from old sci-fi flicks. Instead, it boasted a dark superstructure on its top, a three-sided pyramid that seemed to cap the triangle perfectly. The very top of this pyramid curved gently, as though designed with an elegance that defied its otherwise aggressive geometry. I could feel a chill run down my spine as I took in the sight, my rational mind struggling to piece together any plausible explanation. A low, electrical humming filled the air, an almost palpable vibration that resonated deep within me. It wasn't a sound that came from any nearby machinery or the hum of passing traffic. It was something alien, something that seemed to vibrate in the very space between the stars and our small town. The customers around me were in a state of hushed alarm, with one person muttering, "What the duck is that thing?" while another wondered aloud if it might have something to do with the nearby military base. As I stood there, my eyes locked onto the enigmatic craft. Something even more bizarre happened. The triangular object began to slow its steady approach, coming to a halt as if it had reached the end of some invisible journey. In those few agonizing seconds, the object seemed to defy time itself, suspended motionless against the luminous canvas of the night. Then, in a move that would forever be etched in my memory, it suddenly cloaked. The three yellow lights stretched and wavered, elongating and contorting in a manner reminiscent of the cloaking maneuvers I'd once seen in a Star Trek episode, like a Romulus warbird slipping silently into invisibility. I stood there, frozen in disbelief, as the clouds behind it became distorted. Where the object had been, the moonlit cloud now appeared warped and uneven, as if viewed through rippling water. In that surreal moment, the normal rules of physics seemed to break down. The customers around me erupted into shouts. "Did you just see that?" Their voices echoing in the stillness of the night. I could only nod silently, still processing every second of the inexplicable spectacle. We all tracked the strange craft as it moved slowly in front of a few illuminated clouds and even a few faint stars. The distortion effect persisted, as if the object was warping reality itself, bending light in ways that no human technology should be capable of. It was as if the universe had momentarily revealed a secret, a glimpse into a realm beyond our understanding, only to pull it back again. Within minutes, the initial shock gave way to a palpable sense of urgency. The crowd that had gathered began to disperse, their whispers turning into hurried steps as they decided that perhaps it was best not to linger near such an anomaly. One by one, the onlookers drifted away, leaving me standing in the cool August night with a racing heart and a mind swirling with questions. I watched as the object continued its slow, deliberate journey across the sky until it finally vanished from sight, swallowed by the darkness, as if it had never been there at all. Back inside, I tried to shake the lingering sensation of awe and terror. I returned to my booth and resumed monitoring the security cameras, but my thoughts kept drifting back to that strange, black triangle and the way its lights had stretched and wavered as it cloaked itself. I couldn't help but wonder if it was some kind of experimental military technology, something from the nearby Air Force base, but deep down, I knew better. I highly doubted that any conventional military vessel could perform such a maneuver, let alone one that appeared as a giant cloaked ship with an impossible geometry, hovering silently in our sky. That night, as I eventually made my way home under the light of a full, unblinking moon, I replayed the events over and over in my mind. Every detail, the warm night air, the eerie hum, the exact shape of the craft, and that surreal moment when the object cloaked itself remained etched into my memory. I realized that what I had seen was not a trick of the light or a product of an overactive imagination. It was something real, something that defied the everyday logic of our world. In the weeks that followed, I couldn't help but discuss the incident with a few trusted friends, though most of them met my account with skepticism. They offered rational explanations, misidentified aircraft, reflections, or even a clever prank. But none of these theories satisfied the vivid recollection of that night. I knew what I had seen. I remembered the deep, resonating hum and the way that triangular craft had glided silently toward us, its three bright yellow lights a stark contrast against the dark, moonlit sky. I remembered the uncanny superstructure on its top, the pyramid-like cap with its elegantly curved top, and the moment it cloaked itself, warping the very fabric of the clouds behind it. Even now, whenever I drive by that area on a warm August evening, a part of me remains on high alert, ever watchful for any sign of that impossible object reappearing. I can still feel the echo of that electrical hum, as if it were a distant memory vibrating at the edge of my consciousness. The world around me continues, as it always has, ordinary and predictable to most. But I know that on that night, the universe chose to reveal a fragment of its deeper mystery. A mystery that I, despite all the skepticism and rational explanations, will never be able to fully comprehend. I've often thought about what that object could have been. Was it an alien craft? A visitor from a distant world, testing our skies with its advanced cloaking technology? Or was it something else entirely? A secret experiment, or a phenomenon that science has yet to explain? The thought that it might be an alien spacecraft is as terrifying as it is thrilling. And even though many dismiss such ideas, the memory of that night remains unassailable. Every detail of that encounter is forever imprinted in my mind. The warm August night, the full and bright moon, the luminous clouds, the gathering of curious customers, and the black triangle that defied every explanation. It was a moment when the boundaries between the known and the unknown blurred. A moment when, for a brief, heart-stopping few seconds, the cosmos reached out and revealed a secret that challenges everything we believe about our world. Even now, as I lie awake in the quiet of my room, I can almost hear that distant, eerie hum, a reminder that out there, beyond the veil of our everyday existence, mysteries continue to unfold in silence. And though I've seen many strange things in my years, nothing has ever quite matched the profound, unexplainable terror and wonder of that night when a black triangle UFO, with its 3 glowing yellow lights and impossible form, sailed silently through the sky right before my eyes.